what's up? It's Sifu Kuttel, and I have the latest version of the LK Chen Han Dynasty hook shield, or Gou Rang. Now, if you don't know what a Gou Rang is, I have a complete video talking about the history and usage of this shield. It's in a separate video, and I'll link it down in the description below so you can check it out. However, in this video, I want to talk more about the improvements and changes of this latest version as compared to the previous version. So let's take a closer look. Now, let's start off with each individual component and measurement. When it comes to the total length, the old shield is 88 centimeters, while the new shield is 91 centimeters. Now, what makes this so interesting is that the additional lengthening is in the lower hook. So while there is no difference from above the hand extending upward and in having no difference in forward reach, it's adding to the coverage below the hand. For the weight of the hook only, the old Gou Rang weighs 979 grams, whereas the new Gou Rang weighs 753 grams. A lot of this weight reduction actually comes down to the width and thickness of the hook itself, and they were able to reduce it by 200 grams. That's almost 20% of the original hook weight. For the shield only weight, the old Gou Rang weighs in at 561 grams, whereas the new shield plate weighs only 545 grams. Even the shield plate has a bit of reduction, but it's not that much. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a byproduct of the shaping of this new curvature that you find on the shield itself. When everything is assembled, the total weight of the old shield is 1,550 grams, whereas the new shield is 1,310 grams. This is easily the most noticeable change. When everything's put together and you're handling it, you can feel that over 200 grams of weight reduction compared to the original version. And I believe this is all going in a very positive direction. It's more light, more agile, more lively, and it doesn't reduce any of that structural quality or defensive potential. When we look closely at the paint, we can see that the old Gou Rang has a single layer of matte black paint, whereas the new Gou Rang has a complete chrome finish. I think this change is excellent for the new shield because when you look at the older shield, even though wear and tear does look cool, it was very easy to scratch off the paint as it seemed it was just a single layer. Now the chrome shield is not going to show that, it's not going to chip away, and it has a very clean look to it, just naturally. When it comes to hand coverage, the old shield had a single plane of curvature, whereas the new shield has two planes of curvature that intersect and even create a rounded shape. By adding this second plane of curvature going up and down, this actually creates this rounded shape that creates almost a cup over the hand itself. And this rounded shape acts as an excellent point of deflection for oncoming force, which increases its defensive potential. When looking at the hooks, the old shield has a larger bottom hook curvature, whereas the new shield has a smaller hook width, but more of an inward hook. This is quite a drastic change, and my best guess would be that having this extended sweeping curve may not have added to any of the defensive capabilities of the shield, and possibly could have been counterproductive as it may have allowed strikes to sneak in underneath or just not have that much trapping capability. Whereas the lengthening of this hook allows for more coverage, and just this forward hooking curve right here still maintains its trapping capabilities and defensive potential. Now for the center spike. The old shield has a very direct forward angle, while the new shield has a slight upward angle. You can really see this in comparison that the angle is much more upward rather than directly straight out. However, this upward spike still remains straight on one end and angled on the bottom end. And this is where it really comes into play, is when you have the shield in a forward tilted position, it still remains level and can still have its piercing capabilities as well as trapping. But even when it tilts up, it's much more of a trapping position, and it's a lot harder for the opponent to free their blade from and not just slip away. Something I'd like to note is that LK Chen himself has put a lot of time and energy into reviving the art of Han Dynasty swordsmanship through producing historically accurate swords and shields just like this, but then also through things like technique exploration and pressure testing in sparring. Now, this is a difficult task because there are no records of how these weapons were used. There are no manuals, there are no treaties from back in the Han Dynasty, so it requires a lot more effort to unlock the secrets of how these weapons were actually implemented in combat. Instead, there has been a lot of work looking at old tomb carvings and paintings, and even close examination of antique blades looking for specific wear and tear. And that's just a start. The next step is actually putting the weapon into motion. In efforts to better understand the Gou Rang and to get different perspectives of its usage, LK Chen has sent shields out to different fencers, sword masters, and martial artists like myself to see if we could collectively unlock the mysteries of this implement and promote its revival in Chinese fencing arts. My personal contribution to this has been through the martial arts perspective and looking at particular weapons that match certain aspects of this hook shield. Now, in the style that I study and teach, Choi Li Fut, there are over 53 different weapons, and still there is nothing just like the Gou Rang. The closest that I can find would be the hook sword. It has a long forward protruding hook, there is some central hand protection and coverage as well as some forward thrusting capabilities, and there is a certain amount of length below the handle that in this case is a straight blade compared to a downward hook. However, as close as the hook sword may be, there are some very distinct differences in handling as well as attack and defensive technique availability, which create a clear separation between the two. In my first video on the Gou Rang, I looked at different types of weapon pairings with the hook shield, from the long jian to the han dao to the ji halberd, and I found that the most comfortable for me was the short han dao. However, when you look at different fencers and sword masters that have been working with this, it's almost universally used with a longer jian or fencing sword. So I would like to revisit exploring techniques and ways of using this shield with the long Han fencing jian and see how this length and the extra hand protection will change the dynamics for each technique. First off, we'll start with the shield hand forward. Now, this is much more practical when you have a long blade like the Han Jian because it extends far enough past the shield that you can still use it for attack, and having the shield in the front gives you that much more extra protection. Our first technique is the hook and cut. It's quite simple. We're going to lead in with the shield hooking to pull at the opponent's wrist, and then follow up in the same direction with our cut. Now, this is especially effective if our opponent only has a sword. So we hook their hand, step in and follow through with the cut, or hook and cut directly. If our opponent has a second weapon, or if they have a shield, there is a potential that by starting and initiating this movement, they may be prepared to block. Our next technique is the hook and thrust, and it's basically a variation of our first technique. Again, we're going to use that hook to pull at the wrist, pulling downward and clearing and opening a space, and we'll follow through with a straight thrust. Now, we can also use this from a parrying position or an outward block. So if my opponent is advancing in with an attack, I can use this to clear and hook and then move in with my thrust, or I can use it for a quick inward parry and thrust. Again, like our first technique though, if we're going to be following up and our opponent has either another weapon or shield, there's a potential that this can get blocked as it's moving to the inside. Now that's where our final technique is going to come in, where again, we're using this hooking position either as a parry for an oncoming attack, or we're grabbing and pulling at their wrist on the sword hand, or just even manipulating the sword itself. However, instead of staying on one side and then attacking on their open side that may be blocked with their other hand, we're going to jump over the shield and cut outward. So now, after our clearing motion, we can clear all the way through, hook, and then strike, hook, and then step all the way through and cut. But now we're going to be attacking from the other side of the shield, which is a lot harder for them to deal with if that's the side that's trapped. Now these three techniques are a great starting point for anybody that wants to introduce Gou Rang to their fencing. We're working from a very similar path in the beginning: clearing, striking, clearing, thrusting, clearing, and attacking from the other side. So you have multiple options just from a single clearing or hooking and trapping technique, as well as you can advance this and create variables by simply changing your footwork, stepping all the way forward with the attacking leg, clearing and moving back in defense, clearing, striking, changing position, turning to the side, drilling with just simple variations of footwork, even though you're using the same core 3 techniques, will develop your adaptability in fencing practice. So that's where I'm going to leave it off for this video. But before I go, I have a couple of questions for you. First off, what are your thoughts on the Gou Rang as far as its use tactically? And what do you think it would be best used for? My other question is, what weapon in Chinese martial arts do you think is closest to this hook shield? I'd be interested to hear your opinions on this. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.